Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ether Tale Radio Theater. I'm your host, Scott Paulson. And tonight, it's our Valentine's show because it's close to Valentine's Day.
Yay.
Yeah. And by the time this gets put on the podcast, it probably will be Valentine's Day. So there you go. And there's always time for love. Always time for love, ladies and gentlemen. And tonight in the studio, there are a handful of us that were well enough to arrive. Melanie Peters is here in good voice. Melanie, this is your sound check. Go.
Hello, this is my sound check. Testing.
And Gabriel Pan is also in good voice. This is your sound check, Gabriel Pan. Go.
Hello, how's it going there, San Diego?
Yes. And, of course, we can't do a narrated show without our official narrator, Barbara Henderson.
Well, hi, Scott. I didn't know I'd been promoted.
Yes, yeah. And it comes with a sash and a sword and a tiara. So many things. I'll bring those next time for you, Barbara, I promise you.
I'll count on it.
Tonight, we're going to do a delightful Valentine story written by Louise, Chandler, Moulton. And it was included in a book of short stories. And the book comes from 1880, and this story is probably a bit older than that. And it is entitled, to be titled, Dr. Joe's Valentine. Barbara, could you take us into the story now?
I'll do that, Scott. There were half a dozen of the girls together, pretty creatures, in the very first season of their long dresses, the eldest not quite 16. They were all braids and puffs and fluffy curls, all loops and ruffles and ribbons, all smiles and dimples. It was the Saturday before Valentine's Day, in a certain year of grace, of which I will not give you the precise date, but less than 10 years ago, and more than 5. Of the half-dozen girls, 2 are busy teachers now, 2 are married, 1 is playing mother to her brother's little brood of orphan children, and the 6th, not less happy than the rest, has gone on to the next country, where they tell us she will never grow old, never be sick or sorry anymore. Sweet Bertha, whom surely God loved. But that day in February, none of them thought much about the future. The present was enough, with its fun and frolic, its wealth of all the pleasures which girlhood holds dear. The 6 were passing the long day together. 2 of them were sisters and belonged in one house, and the rest had come there to be with them, for they were all going to make valentines. They had made funny ones and foolish ones, tender ones with just a little dash of satire in them, poetic ones and prosy ones. And at last it was dinner time. A feast of all the things that schoolgirls love, and these were hungry girls. At least they were all hungry girls but Nellie Hunt, and she scarcely ate any dinner at all. She was so busy thinking. She was Bertha's sister, and this was her home in Bertha's, and it was to the girls' own room that the little party went back again after they had eaten and praised Mrs. Hunt's dinner.
What are you thinking about, Nell?
Bertha asked, sitting on the arm of Nellie's chair.
These valentines.
Nellie answered slowly.
Well, surely they need not make you sober. They are absurd enough. Yes, and it's just because they are so absurd that they make me sober. I was wondering why we couldn't just as well have said something to help somebody, to make somebody think, to do some good. Nellie's heroics,
Cried Kate Green flippantly.
Miss Nellie Hunt as a moral reformer.
Nellie blushed from her pretty ears to the roots of her sunny hair, but her eyes shone clear, and there was a ring of earnestness in her voice as she answered.
You can laugh if you will, but I mean what I say, and I'm going to try an experiment. I will write one boy a valentine, such as I think a girl ought to write, and I'll send it. So you shall,
Bertha said gently. Bertha always was peacemaker.
And we'll all go away and see Mama and the baby while you write it. When it's done, you must call us. Yes, and you must show it to us,
cried Kate Green as she went away.
That's only fair. We promised this morning to show each other all we sent, and we shan't let you off.
And then the 5 fluttered away like a flock of birds, and Nellie was quite alone. Her task was harder than she had imagined. It is only the old, perhaps, who are sage in counsel by nature. At any rate, to give good advice did not come naturally to pretty Nellie. But she had an idea of what she wanted to say, and at last she got it said. She had written and rewritten it, and finally concluded that she could do no better, and then copied it out into her neatest handwriting before she called the others. It was a little stiff, to be sure, and preachy and high-flown, but it sounded like a lofty effort and a complete success to the listening girls. This was what it said.
My Valentine, you will have plenty of fine speeches and praises, and perhaps of fun and fancy from others, so I shall not give you those. I who have but one interest in you, namely, that you should be the best boy and the best man which it is possible for you to become. If you are selfish, if you are indolent, if you are mean, you will never be happy in your own society until you have sunk so low that you don't know the difference between goodness and badness. But if you set out to be a gentleman and a man of honor and a faithful worker, you will do good deeds and live a happy life and be worthy the everlasting esteem of your Valentine.
Nellie read it with rising color and a little quiver about her mouth, which Bertha understood, but she read it with firm voice and careful, deliberate accent.
Then,
she said when she had finished,
I shall burn up all the rest of my Valentines and send only this one, for it is what I mean in earnest, and as old Auntie Smoke says,
If it don't do no good, it can't do no harm, okay?
to whom shall you send it, dear?
Bertha asked gently, a little subdued by Nellie's epistolary success.
I hadn't made up my mind.
Nellie answered thoughtfully.
They all need it. Oh, send it to Joe, my cousin Joe,
Cried Kittie Green.
he's staying with us, and he needs it. Bad enough. If ever a boy was full of his pranks, Joe is, and if ever a boy tormented a girl's life out, Joe does mine.
A color, clear and bright as flame, glowed on Nellie Hunt's cheeks. Had she had dark-eyed Joe in her mind all the while? She only answered very quietly.
I don't mind. I had just as lief send it to Joe. That is, I'll send it to him if you'll promise, on your sacred honor, never in any way to let him know who wrote it. Oh, I will. True as I live and breathe. I'll never tell him and never let him guess if I can help it. And all you girls?
Nellie asked, with the pretty pink glow deepening in her cheeks.
Will you all promise?
And they all promised, for there was a sort of honest earnestness in Nellie's nature to which they found it natural to yield. So the Valentine was directed in Nellie's most neat and proper manner to
Mr. Joe Green.
and was dropped into the post office with the rest of the Valentines the girls had written that day. On the 15th, the 6 girls were all together at school, comparing notes and exchanging confidences. But Kittie Green drew Nellie aside and said, while they walked up and down the hall together, their arms around each other as girls will,
I saw Joe get it, Nellie.
Nellie's pretty cheeks glowed and her eyes shone like stars, but she asked no questions. Indeed, they were scarcely necessary, for Kittie was eager enough to tell her story.
He got it, don't you think, along with a half a dozen others, and he read them all before he came to this one. I knew this, you know, by the shape of the envelope. When he came to it, I saw him read it all through, and then I saw him go back and read it again. I heard him say to himself,
That's an honest letter from some little saint.
Then he came up to me and held it toward me while I pretended to be very busy with my Valentines. Then he asked,
Hey, do you know that handwriting, Kit?
I felt like an awful little liar, but I had promised you. I stretched my hand out for it and said carelessly, "Why, ain't it Sue's?" Sue is his sister, you know. So he thought I did not know who it came from, and he changed his mind and put it into his pocket and went off. When I teased him afterward to let me see it, he said,
No, there are some things a fellow would just be a cad to show.
So I saw it hit home, and well, it might. It was a tremendous letter, Nellie.
And Kittie ended with a hug and a kiss and a look of that loyal admiration which a girl can give another girl now and then. When the spring came, Joe Green went away from Chester and did not come back there any more. No doubt Nellie Hunt would have forgotten his very existence but for the Valentine which she could not forget. She used to blush as she grew older to think how
Bumptious.
it was, as she used to call it to herself. What was she that she should have undertaken to preach a sermon to that boy? What if he remembered it only to think how presuming it was and to laugh at it? But luckily he did not know from whom it came, and with that thought she cooled her blushes. Nellie was 20 when Joe Green came back to Chester again, and now he came as a physician, just through his studies and anxious to build up a practice. Soon his fame grew. His patients were among the poor at first, and he cured them. And then richer people heard of it and sent for him. But while he took all the patients that came, he never gave up his practice among those who most needed him. His praise was in all their mouths. There had never been any doctor like this one. Nellie was Miss Hunt now, for Bertha had gone away from her into the other unknown country, and Nellie's grief had made her gentle heart yet more gentle, and her helpful spirit yet more helpful. Toward night one summer day, she had gone to see an old woman who had been her nurse once, and had found her very ill, quite too ill to be left alone, and certainly in need of a physician. So Nellie tore a leaf from her memorandum book and wrote on it a few lines, begging Dr. Green to come at once, and then called to the first passer-by and entreated him to take it to the doctor. It was scarcely half an hour before Dr. Green came in, quietly and gravely. He attended to his patient with that careful consideration which made all those poor souls whom he visited adore him. Then he turned to Nellie.
Who will stay with her tonight?
He asked.
For indeed, she hardly ought to be left alone.
I shall stay,
Was the quiet answer.
Then come to the door with me, please, and let me give you your directions.
Nellie followed and stood there in the soft summer dusk, a pretty picture, with the wild rose flush dawning in her cheeks and a new light kindling her eyes. She listened carefully to all his injunctions and then turned as if to go, but he put out a hand to detain her.
How very much I owe you.
He said,
You? How?
and a deep, deep crimson dyed Nellie's face and throat. In that moment, she thought of her bumptious Valentine, which had not crossed her mind before for a long time. He looked at her with a smile in his eyes, but with a face that preserved all its respectful gravity. He took a red leather case out of his pocket, and from the case he took the very old Valentine, which Nellie remembered so well. Then he produced the brief note she had written that afternoon, and still there was light enough left in the day to see them by as he held them side by side.
Your hand has matured somewhat since this Valentine was written,
He remarked quietly.
but some of these letters I should know anywhere. No one could deceive me.
Oh, I did not suppose you had kept that foolish thing.
Nellie said with a pitiful little quiver in her voice, as if she were just on the point of bursting into tears.
I am so ashamed.
Dr. Joe looked at her a moment as she stood there in the waning light, a lovely, graceful girl from whom any man might be proud to win even a passing interest. So this was the woman, the thought of whom he had carried in his heart for years. If he had ever done any good thing, he was paid for it in the satisfaction of that hour.
Are you sorry
He asked slowly.
that you've helped one man to be his best self? These words of yours were to me like the voice of my inmost soul. Since then, this paper has never left me, nor have I ever ceased to strive to be worthy of the esteem of my unknown Valentine. If ever I have been generous instead of selfish, brave instead of cowardly, strong instead of weak, it has been because I have remembered the words written here and meant to live in their spirit. Are you sorry for that? Or do you grudge me the dear pleasure of thanking you?
No, I'm not sorry, nor do I grudge you anything. But it was a girl's freak, and I am not worthy of so much praise and honor.
It was a good girl's good intention.
He said almost solemnly.
Let us be thankful that it succeeded.
Nellie went back to the bedside of the old woman with a fluttering heart. How strange it seemed to think this sick woman was old enough to have outlived all anxieties except those about her pains and her supper. Had not she been young once, and had no one ever looked at her as Dr. Joe looked? The next morning he came again. His medicine, a night's sleep, Nellie's care, something seemed to have given the poor old patient a fresh lease of life. There was no need that Nellie should stay with her anymore, but she went to see her daily, and it was curious how often Dr. Joe's visits happened at the same time. One night, the doctor had left his horse at home, and he and Nellie walked away together. They talked about the lingering sunset and the soft south wind, and even the old woman. For Nellie, woman-like, was struggling desperately to keep Dr. Joe from saying what she desperately wanted to hear. But at last it came, a half-blunt, half-awkward speech, yet with Dr. Joe's honest heart in it.
I've lived all these years just to earn your esteem, and now I find I don't care a thing about that unless I can also win your love.
I think Nellie's answer must have satisfied him, for she is Mrs. Joseph Green now, and that Valentine, worn and old but choicely framed, always hangs over the doctor's study table.
Well, that was a beautiful story. Thank you, everybody. Thank you especially to Barbara, who had to read so many words.
They were lovely words.
But even beyond that, poor Melanie Peters had to be every single girl in the story because everybody was out sick tonight.
I'm every woman.
You are. And I know that
And you
Karen
did them
Fisher
well.
appreciates you filling in for her, and Martha, Jane, Lowney appreciates you,
Kittie.
Weaver, and Kira Sullivan was very appreciative. And we'll do the story again sometime with all of them.
Yeah.
But you know, now we know that it's going to work out just fine, and that's wonderful. And what a wonderful Valentine's story. Well,
Very
speaking of
sweet.
Valentines, let's talk about some Valentine history, if we may. And I think the first up, what we're going to do at first is just throw all my pieces of paper up in the air, and then see how they land, and everyone pick one. Everyone has picked a piece of paper, and you go first, Melanie.
All right. So Valentine's Day, also called Saint Valentine's Day, is a holiday when lovers express their affection with greetings and gifts. The holiday has origins in the Roman festival of Lupercalia, held in mid-February. The festival, which celebrated the coming of spring, included fertility rites and the pairing off of women with men by lottery. And at the end of the 5th century, Pope Gelasius I replaced Lupercalia with St. Valentine's Day. It came to be celebrated as a day of romance from about the 14th century. Although there were several Christian martyrs named Valentine, the day may have been taken its name from a priest who was martyred in about 270 Common Era by the Emperor Claudius II Gothicus.
Well, speaking of martyrdom, my piece of paper that I picked up off the floor says, yes, there are numerous martyrdom stories associated with various Valentines connected to February 14, including the written account of Saint Valentine of Rome's imprisonment for performing weddings for soldiers who were forbidden to marry and for ministering to Christians persecuted under the Roman Empire. According to legend, Saint Valentine restored sight to the blind daughter of his judge. I think you mentioned that. And he wrote her a letter signed, Your Valentine, as a farewell before his execution. The Feast of St. Valentine was established by Pope Gelasius I in AD 496 to be celebrated on February 14th in honor of the Christian martyr, St. Valentine of Rome, who died on that date. That's what he did. Oh, Barbara, do you have a piece of paper that you've picked up off the floor that I threw in the air?
I grabbed
Remember when
one.
I did that?
And in the mad rush, I picked up one that brings us to 1797, when a British publisher issued The Young Man's Valentine Writer, which contains scores of suggested sentimental verses for the young lover unable to compose his own. Printers had already begun producing a limited number of cards with verses and sketches called mechanical valentines. Paper valentines became so popular in England in the early 19th century that they were assembled in factories. Fancy valentines were made with real lace and ribbons, with paper lace introduced in the mid-19th century. In 1835, 60,000 Valentine cards were sent by post in the United Kingdom, despite postage being expensive.
Obviously, your piece of paper was all Britain, Britain, Britain. What about you, Gabe? Did you pick up a piece of paper off the floor?
Yeah, and mine actually carries on from there. Since the 19th century, handwritten notes have given way to mass-produced greeting cards. In the UK, just under half the population spend money on their Valentines, and around £1.9 billion was spent in 2015 on cards, flowers, chocolates, and other gifts. The average Valentine spending has increased every year in the US, from $108 a person in 2010 to $131 in 2013. The rise of internet popularity at the turn of the millennium is creating new traditions. Millions of people use every year digital means of creating and sending Valentine's Day greeting messages, such as e-cards, love coupons, or printable greeting cards.
I disapprove.
Snail mail forever.
An estimated 15 million e-Valentines were sent in 2010, so there. Valentine's Day is considered by some to be a hallmark holiday due to its commercialization.
There's always time for love. Thank you for that brief history. Now, I have one Valentine I want to read, and it's from Edgar Allan Poe. And I just want to reset my harp pedals to be something spooky for Edgar Allan Poe. See, down, middle, down, up, down, up, middle, something like that. Let's see. Yeah, that's spooky enough. Good. Okay. So here is a poem from Edgar Allan Poe that was to be titled, A Valentine. For her this rhyme is penned, whose luminous eyes, brightly expressive as the twins of Leda, shall find her own sweet name that nestling lies upon the page, enwrapped from every reader. Search narrowly the lines, they hold a treasure divine, a talisman, an amulet. This must be worn at heart. Search well the measure, the word, the syllables. Do not forget the trivialest point, or you may lose your labor. And yet, there is in this no Gordian knot, which one might not undo with a saber if one could merely comprehend the plot. Enwritten upon the leaf here now are peering eyes, scintillating soul, there lie perdu. There 3 eloquent words, oft uttered in the hearing of poets, by poets, as a name, as a poet's too. Its letters, although naturally lying, like the knight Pinto, Mendez Ferdinando, still form a synonym for truth. Cease trying. You will not read the riddle, though you do the best you can do. So that was a romantic reading of Edgar Allan Poe. Valentine.
was romantic.
But here's the thing, Barbara. Here's the thing. Do you have a pencil where you can make some noises on your piece of paper near your microphone? Because
Okay.
there is a code in this poem. So make sure you make a lot of pencil sounds here. First, Barbara, encircle the first letter of the first line. Encircle.
Okay.
It needs to be audible. Encircle. Thank you. Then encircle the second letter of the second line. Third letter of third line. Fourth letter of fourth line. Fifth letter of fifth line. Sixth letter of sixth line. Seventh letter of seventh line. Eighth letter of eighth line. Ninth letter of ninth line. 10th letter of 10th line. 11th letter of 11th line. 12th letter of 13th letter of 13th. 14th letter of 15th. 16th. Now circle the 17th letter that's, in the 17th line. The 18th letter of the 18th line. The 19th letter of the 19th. The 20th letter of the 19th. And here's the letters that you see. Frances, Sargent, Osgood. Why, it's the name of a married woman that he had an interest in. Oh,
Guess it's not
Frances.
secret now.
May I tell you it?
Yes.
Frances Sargent Good. Although he spelled Sargent wrong and early on, and they said he corrected it later. But anyway, he never read the poem to her, but I think he knew that one day she would find out. And I don't think he pursued an interest in her, but he did love her.
As you were reading it, I was trying to figure out if the letter of each line, I was like, is each line starting, like, was it spelling Valentine's?
No.
But then it was like, no.
And it wasn't as obvious as some politicians have done with their proclamations, where
Right.
it's always the first letter and you can just
Right.
tell it says something.
Resist.
Oh my God, it says something really bad.
Yeah.
I believe they call that the invective. And it was like, you can't just do the first letter of each line. It's too obvious. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Edgar Allan Poe, for your confession of love to Mrs. Frances Sargent Osgood. Oh my.
Edgar Allan Poe, keeping it awkward.
Keeping
since
it,
ever.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Freakishly horrific love song.
Now, Wade, are you still awake in the control room?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you in your smoking jacket now and home smoking your cigar? What's going on in the control room? Are you
Well,
there?
Well, cognac always goes well with Valentine's poems.
I know. And just because you drink it out of your coffee cup, that doesn't mean we know that's what's going on, Wade. So, now, Wade, I came across this very old Valentine's book, and there was a very short story in it called A Valentine Party. And I'm just going to read the first few lines, but you're going to read a poem that is there, and then take a pause and read the second poem that happens to be there. Are you
One
ready,
we
Wade?
must. One
First
we
me. And this very short story from this very old book is entitled to be titled A Valentine Party. The children had a Valentine party, the very nicest party, they all declared. It's the very nicest party that they had ever been to in their lives. All the cousins in the neighborhood, and there were a lot of them, were there. What fun they had opening their Valentines, which a really postman brought with his gray uniform and his whistle and his great leather pack. Dear me, he said, pretending to groan as he handed the missives. If you had a party every day here, I think I should be completely worn out. But his eyes twinkled merrily. Such shouts and exclamations as the Valentines were opened and read, and such fun looking at everybody else's. Here are two. Here are the two poems, Bessie's and Fred's. Now, Wade, could you please read the one that was intended for Fred now?
Delighted. I'm for the boy who can stand on his head and never likes to go to bed. If there's more than one of them, I'm for Fred.
Hooray for Fred. And now, Wade, the final poem in this little story is the one intended for Bessie. Could you read that one now?
I bring a kiss from far away. It's traveled many miles today. Take it, my dear, and send one back to your old loving Uncle Jack.
Oh my, the children ought to have such a good time if all had received as dear little Valentines as these. Don't you agree, Wade?
Yes.
Thank you for that
definitely.
ad-lib moment of yes. Thank you. I threw that one at you. Thank you, Wade. Well read indeed. So we had so much fun tonight and with our Valentines, and I think we covered everything we needed to. Oh, no, there's one more story, of course. We have Liam Flynn's story, but I prefer that he be here seated at a live microphone because it's much more fun when he's laughing at his own story as I read it. So I'll play some spooky harp music while he comes a spooky harp, away And he's here. Liam Flynn has brought another story for us to end our broadcast with. We always here at Ether Tale Radio Theater end with a Liam Flynn story. And by the way, listeners, Liam Flynn has a learner's driver's permit license thing now. So this is your warning. This is your warning that he is on the road. But he's always with his father, right? Does your mother refuse, or is your mother sometimes with you? Sometimes, excellent. So that must mean you're good if your mother's willing to be in the car with you.
In about 2 months.
Excellent.
When I have my test.
Oh, I'll have to light a special candle for you. And not at the site, not at the papers at the site, not near the test score things. No, I won't do a light candle there. So here's our final story of the evening from Liam Flynn. It was another day on Planet Sweatpants in Sweatpants Universe, and the Dohai cleaning guy had just got back from his 2-week vacation after cleaning up the gigantic mess, and Tony's friend Alex had invited himself over again, this time for a week. Immediately after Alex called, saying that he was on his way and will be there in about 2 hours, Tony went off to Sweatpants Co. because he knew he was going to need a lot of food. At Sweatpants Co., Tony got 5 dozen eggs, 50-pound bag of rice, 25 pounds of hash browns, 50 pounds of fries, 3 big bags of chips, 5 large containers of salsa, 3 tubs of guacamole, well, that was even spelled right, and a bunch of other stuff. After arriving home, Tony had about 20 minutes until Alex got there, so he quickly put everything away and made sure that there was plenty of rotting food lying around. When Alex arrived, Tony did one of the biggest burps ever known to mankind, which shook the whole country, and Alex said, "Excuse you," which only made Tony laugh about it even more. In the house, Alex discovered all the rotting food lying around in all the usual abnormal places, and some new ones, including behind, under, over, next to, in, on, and smeared on the TV, under and behind the couch, under carpets, inside large boots, in lighting fixtures, under beds, under pillows, on the roof of the house, stuffed in holes in the walls, in desk drawers, crammed in marker caps, splattered on the walls and ceiling, ground into carpets, under chair cushions, in computer cases, on top of the grandfather clock, jammed in the landline phone, flattened in books, behind storage boxes, in between books and DVDs on shelves, in cabinets, stuck in the peephole in the front door, all over the lawn, in the recycling bin, and bin, I meant to say, in the recycling bin, and anywhere humanly possible to hide food. Some of it was moldy, some of it was stale, some of it was fresh, some old, some new, some poor, partly eaten, some half-eaten, some with a bite taken, and some rock hard. Alex then gave Tony a very funny scolding before convincing him to help clean it up and give him a long, funny lecture. After cleaning up, Alex asked to borrow a computer keyboard for a little bit and received one that was fried from Tony getting food in it. He found out that there was food in it from the outside of it being disgusting. Several keys weren't working, and when he picked it up to give it a good shake, the crumbs and other food rattled around, making a funny sound. The very next day, Alex woke up bright and early and made several dozen eggs and lots of hash browns for breakfast for himself and Tony. They both ate a lot of it, then got into Tony's car to go places around the county. In the car, Tony kept doing really bad-smelling farts every 2 minutes, and Alex kept opening the windows, and the first few times he said, "Excuse you." Then when he noticed that Tony kept laughing and making jokes about it, he started getting annoyed by it and kept exclaiming, "It's not funny." Opening the farging windows when you do it. Oh, I see, that's not a real swear word. Opening the farging windows when you do it. Tony kept answering with, "I never said it was funny." At their first destination, which happened to be a camera store, Tony did a fart so big and awful smelling that the Center for Disease Control declared the property and his pants a level 7 biohazard. After the camera store, which had to be evacuated, Tony and Alex went over to a Taco Sweatpants for a snack. They got 3 burritos, 3 tostadas, and 3 quesadillas. Alex got a more normal snack of large nachos. Then they went to Sweatpants Electronics to get a new food-proof keyboard, a different Sweatpants Co., which was across the parking lot from a Sweatpants Depot hardware store, and a furniture store to meet up with Ned and hang out those places for several hours each. They tried out every chair and couch in the furniture store, looked at everything in Sweatpants Co. and Sweatpants Depot. After those 4 places, it was dinner time, and they went to the usual Dohai. Tony went to use the restroom and confused the automatic flushing urinal to keep flushing again before grinding a ton of food into the carpet and making a big mess. When they left, the cleaning guy came out from his hiding spot to see how bad the mess was this time. And it was worse than before. He had to scrub, sandblast, and repaint the walls and ceiling, use an asphalt grinder, street sweeper, 2,500 horsepower ride-on vacuum, power washer, and washing machine to clean the carpet. Well, what didn't have to be replaced? I'm going to tell you. Then used extremely heavy-duty cleaning supplies to clean everything else before taking a 1-month vacation to a remote island far, far away that doesn't have self-service. The end. Well, thank you for that story, Liam Flynn. These are getting better and better. Now, please promise that you'll put a chicken... It's called a microphone. Please promise to put a chicken in one of these so that your father can do his famous chicken impression.
I'll do that next time.
And what does that chicken sound like again? See, that's so excellent, Liam. Your father's chicken is so excellent that it must be incorporated in a story, or I won't read it. So there has to be a chicken next time. Even if it's just simply as, ooh, let's go to that taco place because their chicken tacos are so fresh. There's no substitute for freshness. Okay, so that's our story. Thank you, Barbara, for hanging out with us while the others evacuated. Oh, no, Gabe is still here. Gabe is still here, too. Good night, Gabe.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Barbara Henderson.
Good night, Scott.
Good night, Liam Flynn. Good night, Amazing Chicken. It's called a microphone, Peter. Look into it. Oh, there it is. Yes. Good night. I'm Scott Paulson, your host. And thank you, Wade, for reading 2 Valentine's poems for us. Wade, thank you.
Yay.
All-powerful Wade.
Attention coaches, authors, speakers, and business owners. Please pay close attention to what I'm about to say if you want to secure massive visibility fast and generate thousands of highly qualified leads without spending a dime on advertising or marketing. The easiest way to make this happen is to appear as a guest on the world's most popular podcast. We recently came across an awesome resource that provides detailed contact information for 240 new media influencers who are looking for guests just like you. It's called the Ultimate Directory, and for a limited time, you can get the preview edition of the directory absolutely free. That's right, for free. It's time for you to get the visibility you and your business deserve and connect with the world's leading icons of influence who can make you famous with the push of a button. Get your free preview edition of the Ultimate Directory right now at www.myultimatedirectory.com. That's myultimatedirectory.com.
You were born to do one amazing thing, but most people spend a lifetime trying to identify what it is. If you're in a job you don't like or are unemployed, if you're in a state of transition or just can't shake that nagging feeling that you were meant and made to do something extraordinary, then the Reinvention Workshop is exactly what you need. Led by award-winning self-help author Steve Olsher, the Reinvention Workshop will forever change your life. The Reinvention Workshop takes you step by step through Steve's proven formula that has helped so many people get on the right path and clear about what they were born to do. Take the first step to realizing the life you deserve and desire by visiting thereinventionworkshop.com today. No more delays, no more denial. Reconnect with your true self. Learn to live with purpose and conviction and become who you were born to be. The world is waiting for you. What are you waiting for? Log on to thereinventionworkshop.com today. That's thereinventionworkshop.com.
much to do, not enough time to get it done? Call on the experts at Another 8 Hours for your business support needs. By partnering with Another 8 Hours, we allow you to focus on the more important matters, like being in front of your clients, doing what you do best, rather than being stuck at a desk poring over paperwork, rummaging through emails, returning phone calls, and struggling to get everything done by yourself. Meanwhile, your family and social life are going down the drain. Go to another8hours.com or call 8 more hours. That's 866-734-6877.
This is Bill Gruber with BizVid Communications, a Southern California video production leader. We've been honored to sponsor, produce, write, and host many of the fine programs on WS Radio over the years. So we understand how important the internet and your website exposure are. As video producers, we know the tricks and secrets to incorporate video to increase your search engine optimization and business success. Visit bizvidcommunications.com to see what we can do for you. BIZVID communications.com.